This is the third year we've had this segment. It's been really, really popular. It's fast-paced. Nobody gets bored in any part of it. We have 6 different pairings of conversations. They are up on the screen. I'm not going to give you everybody's bio, but we're really fortunate to have 6 terrific grads and 6 interviewers who are also fantastic. With us, many are faculty. We have 1 graduate interviewer. Our first grouping is Professor Hemanth Gundavaram. Thank you, Hemanth, for being here. And we have Neil Leifer. So, Neil, I'm thrilled you were with us. He canceled a trip to be with us. No, I'm just kidding. But take it away, Neil and Hemanth.
Thank you, Neil, for get this away from me. Thank you, Neil, for setting this up. This is exciting to do. Neil and I recently had lunch, and it was lovely. So my first question actually kind of goes with the last thing that Judge Cabell talked about, which is successes and failures. You know, we live in this world where it seems like it pays to brag. And that has become the essence of social media. But I think the harm that it creates, especially for young people, is the unrealistic idea that successful people never fail. So, Neil, I wanted to ask you, what was the biggest setback of your legal career? Since you're here, I assume you recovered from that. So how did you recover from that? And maybe talk a little bit about where it took you.
First of all, can you all hear me?
No.
Is it on?
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. It's a tough spot to be in between Judge Cabell and James Morton. I'll do the best I can. After 40 years, there's a lot of setbacks, so I'll pick the one that I think had the most transformative effect on my life, and it's closely connected to the law school because it's a case that I did that started in the 1980s, and actually parts of it continue today, and it was inspired by Jim Rowan, who's sitting up here, who invited me to a meeting at the Children's Advocacy Center in, I think, 1986, to talk about childhood lead poisoning, which I had never heard of. And on the way out of the door, he said, to get ready for this meeting, he said, read this decision by the 7th Circuit, which was an FTC decision about how the lead paint industry had price fixed, which seemed totally far afield of what we were talking about. But in that decision was the entire history of the industry. And I knew from representing Indian tribes how the federal government does discovery, which is they take everything you have and they never give it back. And so a Northeastern co-op student, I asked him to see if he could find the record. He found it in the National Archives. No one had looked at these documents in almost 50 years. And I went down to the National Archives and pried open the boxes, and in it was the entire history of the industry, correspondence, communications between companies, trade associations, and all of them talking about how kids are being poisoned and dying, and it's really a bad public relations problem for us. And so I thought we had the perfect case, and we put together a case for a child from Roxbury, and we had a team. It was a classic Northeastern mismatch. Liz Rogers' partner, Rob Doyle, and Judy Somberg, who Judy is a Northeastern grad, was on our team, so we clearly were outmatching the 40 lawyers on the other side from Kirkland and Ellis, and Jones Day, and Goodwin Proctor, and all the other big firms in and around the town. And we thought we had the perfect liability case. And we had a really strong liability case, but they out-litigated us, and they also convinced the court, I believe, that there was no exit strategy from this kind of litigation. And we lost. After 5 years of litigating and after learning a ton about lead, we lost. And what I learned from that, and we lost because we couldn't figure out which of the 5 companies had poisoned Monica. And we went with the Summers versus Tice theory. We said, you all figure it out because one of you did it. And it's not her fault. And the judge didn't buy that theory, and we got flattened. And what I learned from that, after being really devastated for a couple of years, was that if you're going to do impact litigation, you've got to you've got to have a strong liability case, but you also have to have an exit strategy. You have to have a way for the court and a way for even for the enemy, the other side, to put together a package to resolve the case. And we couldn't do that with individual children. And then after working with the state on tobacco litigation, this is where it recovers from. I realized, we saw the model. And it was that, first of all, you need to have a big bodyguard on your side, just like they have. And so we had the state. And so we kind of leveled the playing field. And we also only had 50 states. So if we were right, there was a way there was an off-ramp. And so we tested the proposition of lead liability again. We won a big case in Rhode Island. We lost on the appeal. But then in California, we started it again. And I litigated the case for 10 years enthusiastically. Kind of got burned out, which we'll talk about later if we have time. And the Motley Rice firm and a brilliant lawyer, his name is Fidelma Fitzpatrick, carried the case over the line. And last year, it finally settled after 20 years for a $300 million fund to de-lead housing in cities and counties of California. So what I learned was you lose, you be persistent. If you have a good theory, you figure out how it can work, and you give the court, and you give the other side a way to buy their peace and a way for the court to fashion the remedy.
That's great, thank you. When we had lunch recently, you arrived by bike, and I embarrassingly had arrived by Uber. And I know biking is a passion of yours, and making safe, accessible transportation and exercise in all neighborhoods in Boston is also a passion of yours, and it evolved from an investigation into fast food and sugary drinks industry. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So in 2010, how many years out were we then? We were like 35 years out?
29.
25 years out. 25 years out. I was burned out, beat up, bitten up, chewed up, and spit out by cases, including a big environmental case down in Rhode Island where it was another big New York firm. Actually, the partner in that firm was one of Donald Trump's defenders in his first impeachment. I hadn't seen him in 10 years, and I look on TV, and there he is. So I said, all right. But I was tired, and one thing I would say to the younger lawyers is you got to take care of yourself as lawyers, because we're asked to do this. We have huge pressure. We take on a lot of responsibility. Sometimes people's lives hang in the balance, their liberty, their homes, and that is really stressful, and you got to really take care of yourself. So in 2010, I had kind of worked through lead and tobacco and asbestos, and I decided to take on the fast food industry because of child obesity, which was at that time, and probably still is today, with diabetes, really a serious problem. And I sat in Dick Daynard's living room, he's got a really nice place. I think it's down on Marlborough Street. You should occupy that instead of the dean's office. And we thought through whether or not there was a litigation theory to take him on. And from what I learned in Santiago, what I was just telling you a moment ago, it was like, I'm not doing this unless there is a way to do this. I became convinced that there wasn't a credible litigation model. So I'd had it kind of with practice of law. And I gave up being a counselor of law and became like a counselor of kids. And I went to Bikes Not Bombs in Jamaica Plain, and they taught me how to be a bike mechanic because I was into cycling. and I went to the Boys and Girls Club in Dudley Square, Nubian Square, but Dudley Square then. And we started a bike program for boys and girls, and and I figured if I can't get kids decent food, I can at least get them on bikes and improve their cardiovascular health that way. Thank you. And so for 5 years, I did that, and it was amazing. And I do remember, I was telling you about this at lunch, one day where I'm sitting down at English High School outside, and you can see down the southwest corridor bike path. For those of you out of town, go to English High School and look up the bike path. And I could see my old building. It was like hanging up in the sky. And there were about eight or nine kids, and they were running around on their mountain bikes, and one of them was sitting next to me, and I said, "You see that building out there, and the black one at the top?" I said, "My office was there." And he said, "What were you doing there?" I said, "I'm a lawyer." He said, "You're a lawyer? What are you doing with me?" And I said, "Well, we're riding bikes." That day, I sat there and said, if I ever get a chance to do law again, I'm gonna be grateful. Yeah. And 5 years later, Dick Daynard got me to help try a tobacco case with Margaret Wu's husband, Andrew Rayner. And after putting on the plaintiff, which went very well, I actually did it. I was walking out of the courtroom, and I stopped and I thought about that moment at English High School and said, wow, I got to do it again. And this time I was totally present. So that was, that's what brought me back to it.
Thank you. All right, last question about the law school. So when I arrived here in 2014, I had this feeling instantly that this place felt like home. And I'm wondering, with your class from '81, a couple of questions about the law school. Did you feel that way as well? And what makes this place special? And I want to hear a little bit about your specific class and some of the people you still maybe keep in touch with. You mentioned something about a Zoom band and gravel biking, so I wanted to hear about both of those.
We'll finish with that, but so I never wanted to be on the Supreme Court. So Northeastern was the only law school I applied. And because I'd been working for the Native American Rights Fund, and the lawyers who were litigating a case for the Mashpee tribe on the Cape had gone here, and I got on the Green Line and wrote out my application. And the day I arrived, I knew that this was a place that celebrated people as opposed to just tolerated people. And that was a big distinction for me. The second thing I remember was coming the first day, and maybe I got it wrong, but my classmates will tell me, but I remember Dan Gavelber from the first day saying that the faculty was really insecure and that they had gone through great pain to pick our class, and that we didn't have to look to the left or the right, and one of us wouldn't be there at the end of the year. Everybody, if they showed up, was going to graduate. And he said, it's more for us than for you, because I don't think we could handle the pain of losing one. And I felt like, wow, this is a place that celebrates people and roots for everybody. And we had a great class, and we did bump heads with the administration and the faculty during the year. We actually walked out the 2 weeks before first year finals in 1L, and later in the summer, half the class took over the dean's office. But it was a noble fight, and it was a legitimate issue, and I think it helped to make the law school a better community. I could have done a better job. We didn't have social media, when we were there, so I could have done a better job seeing my classmates since '81. But it was a very good class, and we had lots of caucuses for every identity, including the white boys' identity, which included people of all color and all gender. But we stayed close, some of us, and during the pandemic, Wib Gully, who's from North Carolina, started playing guitar with my band, and we've played every Monday night since March of 2020. And he's gotten pretty good. And this past weekend, I took him up to Vermont. We went gravel bike riding. He'd never been on a gravel bike. After 2 hours, I don't think he's ever going to forgive me for that. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and I'm grateful.
Conversation. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Hemanth. We're quickly rolling. Up is James Morton, class of 81 as well, with Professor James Rowan. Do our quick little switch out.
Oh, good, yeah.
In full service. Wiping down the mics. It's not going to be a super spreader.
James, 23. It's good to see you. Good to see you as well, my friend. So, there's been a notion that we ought to take care of ourselves physically so that we can do the work we need to do. I know that being at the Y, it gives you an opportunity to be around people who are fit, but that you've also been a runner all your career. So how did it impact the way you've looked at your career trajectory?
I think that running's been a part of my life since the very beginning. My father was a prize fighter. I've not used that word in a long time. He was a professional boxer, and so he did road work. And as a young kid, I'd go out with him and run with him, and it just became a part of my life. And then as life would have it, and there would be certain challenges in life. I remember getting up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning and going out for a run with my dog, Tina, just to kind of be able to manage the stress of it all. And that pattern has continued through most of my life. I've continued to try to run as regularly as I could. It's been a challenge more recently than ever before, but we're trying to stick with it and stay at it. And I appreciate Neil's commitment to his health and wellness, and I think it's absolutely right. We've got to take care of ourselves. These jobs are incredibly stressful and demanding, and unless you're careful, they can be overwhelming. And so we have to have those outlets. So thanks for sharing that message, Neil.
So you wound up as the president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Boston, and had done a number of other CEO jobs for the Y in other cities. What's the part of that job from your standpoint? And if you can, in what way does being a lawyer help you do that job effectively?
Coming to Northeastern, one of the things that kind of got emblazoned in my brain was that this was a place where we were committed to positive social change. And so I think I've carried that notion with me my entire life. And so the work that I do at the Y with my colleagues there is completely committed to providing opportunities for young people to reach their fullest potential. And we do that through a number of different engagement opportunities, whether it's our Achievers program, which is on this campus every other week, where our kids, one weekend they learn life skills, the next weekend we put individuals like yourselves in front of them, and they talk about their careers, their goals, and their aspirations, and how they got to where they are, and hopefully our young people get to see them as mountains that they can attain at some point in their own lives. And so we do that, and health and wellness opportunities. I'm going to talk to Neil later today about an opportunity I think that we might have to get kids involved in triathlons, and especially black and brown kids, introduce them to swimming and running and biking. And the biking is the missing piece, and I think he might have the answer to that. So looking for partnerships like that can serve our young people and, again, put them and their families in the best position to be successful.
When we were talking earlier, you said that one of the ways that people look at the Y as well, it's just swimming and camping. And, And you had an insight that I really appreciated about how that plays out in Black and brown communities.
Yes, you know, the YMCA across the country is seen as a swim, gym, and camp organization. And, you know, when I first came to the Y, I didn't really appreciate that aspect of the work and didn't feel like that was part of the mission, because for me, the mission is food, the mission is engagement, the mission is education, is providing our children with every opportunity to be the best that they can possibly be in life. But then over the last few years, I've begun to think about it a little bit differently. And if you think about Black and brown communities, where is the walkability? Where is the neighborhood walkable? And so what can we do to make sure that every neighborhood and every community is walkable? Health and wellness should not be a luxury. You shouldn't have to pay for life fitness and membership fees in order to be a part of a community. Health and wellness should be accessible to each and every one of us. And so part of our mission around, you know, fitness is making sure that everyone has access to it. And we're in every neighborhood in the city, and we have branches in every neighborhood in the city, and our goal is to make sure that all residents of all of our communities can have access to that health and wellness. And in camp, for example, overnight camp. If you've ever sent a child to overnight camp, if you've ever been to overnight camp, you know what an incredible experience it is for you personally. Growth opportunities, you just gain a confidence, you learn more about yourself, you learn about other people, you're interacting in an environment that's typically foreign to you, but it's foreign to everybody, so you've got to figure it all out, and you figure it out together. It builds relationships and identity, right? And so shouldn't that be available to every child? And so one of the things that we're working on right now is making sure that our overnight camps are as diverse as they can possibly be. So we're partnering with Metco here in Boston to send 50 to 100 kids to our overnight camps so that they can have that incredible experience and come out of it with all those different attributes that we know are the benefit of camp. So it's, you know, so swim, gym, and camp, there are communities that don't have access to water. We just established a week ago a partnership with the city of Boston where 300 kids are going to get swim lessons. And we're going to teach 60 high school kids how to be lifeguards, because the emergent need right now, right? Think about the last 20 months, the emergent need was food, and then it became places where essential workers could take their kids for care, and then it became before and after school programs, and then this summer it was helping kids catch up their academic skills that they may have lost because of remote learning, and now the emergent need is drowning prevention. So we have to respond to those emergent needs, and there's your swim, right? So.
One of the roles for an organization like the Y is to help with racial equity in Boston. And the letters that you've been writing, the letters of love and hope, I think play a real role. How did you come to that method? How did you come to decide that that was a way to communicate with your community?
You know, I've been trying to figure out the ways in which one of my professors here kind of informed my life, and I think that this might be the perfect intersection. And that is Jon Flynn. I love Jon Flynn. He was an amazing man. And he had a particular way of thinking about the world. And I think that part of the way I think about social justice and racial justice was certainly encouraged and supported by Jon. And so in that regard, you know, everything that we do is about creating partnerships in the community, and everybody's a part of that work. No one is excluded from the work of trying to help us create a better Boston, a better, greater Boston for all of us. And that requires a certain amount of intentionality, and I think that that's what Jon Flynn in particular stood for, intentional. He was intentional about the things that he did in support of the rights of everybody that he had the benefit of representing and defending and supporting. And so I think that's our job at the Y, is to create those opportunities for people to come together from various different communities in the city and work on issues of race and social justice. And including our members, for example, who pay a fee to be a member of the YMCA, we consider the fees that they pay to be a part of that contribution to that partnership around creating a better Boston. And so our members become partners in that work. And so my role I intentionally talk about the work of the Y in that way, because I totally believe that we can do that. And if we're a good partner with other organizations, then we can do some amazing things in Boston. This is a very special time to be in Boston. There are lots of people in important places doing great work, and I think we have this opportunity to do it together to really change things for lots of folks who are part of this community.
So what is your vision for the next 5 years? What kinds of things are you hoping the Y will do? What are the things that you're hoping you're going to do to help both heal some of the wounds that are long-lasting and to make some advances in the overall social agenda?
So I'll answer that question in this way, and that is around issues of kind of equity in the workplace. One of the things I'm proudest of in the work is that if you take the top 20 people that work at the YMCA, the top 20 members of the leadership, we're 83% folks of color and women, and that's done by intentionality. If you then take the top 5 people in our organization, we are almost like 90% women and folks of color. African-American CEO, African-American COO, African-American Chief Development Officer, our Chief Social Responsibility Officer is a woman, our Chief Program Officer is a woman. It's only our CFO who is not a person of color or a woman. So we've done that on purpose, and I hope that in the next 5 years, that the culture we're setting now is the culture that continues to be a part of the work at the YMCA. And I think the other thing that I hope for our organization is that we will continue to be committed to the most important of work in the community. That we don't know what the next emergent need is going to be for Boston a year from now, 4 years or 5 years from now. But I hope that we'll be that organization that will be bold and courageous enough to take on whatever it is as a way of supporting the community. I mean, who knew that delivering over the last 20 months 11 million meals to families and children in Boston was going to be a necessity? But it is a necessity. In fact, it was a necessity before COVID, and it will continue to be a necessity. But what we've also learned, very importantly, is that the YMCA Greater Boston is not doing that alone. We're doing it with partners. We had 109 locations where we're delivering those meals. How does that happen? With 13 branches, 109 sites for delivery of meals, and that's just the meals. We had 25, community learning centers where kids were able to go to get their remote lessons and to get enrichment and food and movement and social emotional learning opportunities, in the city of Boston. And those are the children of working parents, but mostly poor working parents, whose families' financial stability depended greatly upon them being able to go to work every day. And so we get a chance to do that. And I'm hoping that's what we'll do as we move forward here over the next 5 years or so.
One of the things that you and I talked about was the hope that we have for our own members of the community here. Is there something that you would urge the folks who are here today and the folks who are listening to continue to do and to do that would move the agenda forward?
Yes, we did have this conversation, and what I said, and I'll share this confidence, is that I wasn't going to ask you for money. And so I'm not going to ask you for money, although my job is to ask you for money. But I decided I wasn't going to ask you for money. But what I will ask you for is this. You've got enormous skills and talents, and you are really, really gifted human beings, and you've been a part of a community that is totally dedicated and committed to, serving the community. I would ask you to get involved in community-based organizations. They need your services, they need your skills, they need your talent, they need your energy, your commitments. And, as the dean said early, the Northeastern University is doing great things and making a big difference in the world, and I would ask you to continue that tradition by getting involved yourself. many of our organizations could use your enormous talents.
What a treat. Thank you, Jim.
Take your goodies in your water and
Thank
have a
you.
great conversation. There's something about James Morton that just gets me the front. I don't know what it is. He's powerful and moving. Next up, we have Nima and Mytrang. Both are classmates. 1996. Nima's on this side. Wait, down those mics. Now your hands do it.
I feel like I'm, between two furnaces, between two hand sanitizers.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Ooh, I think I'm already loud, as some of you know. Mytrang, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you too. So good to see you too, and all the class of 96ers that we have in the back row there.
That's right. Welcome, class of 96. Welcome, all reunion classes. I'm so glad to be back here at Northeastern. I feel bad because the wonderful Mr. Morton just said he wasn't going to ask for money, but I think Mytrang and I are going to ask for money.
Not to cannibalize on your day.
Yes, I'm sorry. I mean, that was a really class act, so, but we're going to
I set you up. I'm setting you up.
And also, if you have the capacity, please give money to the Y as well, and the organizations that do this great work in Boston. But as some of you may know, Mytrang has deep experience in Legal Services Corporation that she's going to talk about. I stopped practicing law in 2010, and I moved into higher education, and I recently wrapped a 4-year period where I was the Assistant Dean of Co-op and Career Development here at Northeastern. And I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, from everything that I've witnessed with our student body, our co-op employers, and the type of really synergistic, broad-thinking, interdisciplinary, social justice-focused, impactful work our students do requires a level of support that is unlike any other law school. There's just no matching what our students do on the public interest front. They don't only go into public interest work and also private sector work, and even our private sector students who are amazing and growing in their numbers have a social justice lens. They're trying to make the spaces in which they are working and living better places for all, more inclusive, more diverse, more focused on sustaining our planet for the next generations. So what I would like to say to all of you is that every penny matters. If you are able to give to your alma mater, give to Northeastern. The class of 96 recently opened, we're really proud to announce, a public interest impact co-op fund to support public interest co-ops. I can tell you from firsthand experience, there are students who would really welcome the opportunity to do more and more deep public interest work if they just could have the funds to not have to self-fund their co-ops. So every penny matters. And with that, I will move on to talking about what we're here to talk about, which is Mytrang and her amazing
There are
career.
ties to that, though. I have many things to say in support of what you just said. Thank you.
Well, Mytrang, let's get started. How did Northeastern and your experience here and your co-ops get you to the point that you're in your career? What was the trajectory? Because you do have a really interesting role with the Legal Services
It
Corporation.
is, and I only practice. I was a practitioner. I'm at the Legal Services Corporation right now. For all of you who know what LSC is, we're the largest single funder of civil legal aid in the United States. And so I'm at a grant-making organization. We put out about $465 million in funding for civil legal services. That's free legal services for low-income people. And while that may sound like a lot of money, I'll just give you one data point to think about, which is that our federal government provides funding for civil legal services in an amount that is less than what Americans spend annually on Halloween costumes for their pets. For their pets. So obviously priorities. This is a very resource-constrained community. So I'm glad you talked about, our graduates, because the one thing I will say in my career trajectory, which brought me to DC over the last 20 years to work at national nonprofit organizations that are in the public interest in legal aid space. I'm so delighted to see Jim here because I feel like he has really proliferated and created a community in legal aid that is leading the charge every day of our graduates. Our graduates, if you want to talk about prestige and prominence, we are the ones who are showing up every day for low-income people. And I'm just here to, talk about my career, but to elevate that work and the voices of all these everyday lawyers who are showing up every day for low-income people and doing it in a smart, strategic, very innovative way. So at the Legal Services Corporation, I oversee a grant program that's $4.75 million. And so I'm a funder. And I work with, and it's a real privilege to provide support to the public interest community and legal aid practitioners in particular. I see nothing but connections with Northeastern in my travels and in my work. I was sold when I got here on public interest. It was public interest work and volunteering in college that brought me here. I did a lot of volunteering in my free time with Northeastern grads who were very active in the immigrant justice community. Nancy Kelly, John Wilshire Carrera, Debbie Anker. And then, through my co-ops, I used and explored different avenues. So because I was volunteering so much in the legal aid community, I ended up doing co-ops in the private sector. I worked for law enforcement. I worked at the Suffolk DA's office. I felt like that gave me a really well-rounded experience that I use every day, I think, particularly now where I'm working and have a really broad network of people that I can use to support both this institution and the work that we're doing in terms of elevating the voices of legal aid practitioners.
Fantastic, Mytrang. We're so glad that you're out there on the funding front. We need that, that wisdom and that sort of Northeastern esprit de corps overseeing how these funds are allocated. And it's shocking, the Halloween example.
And I love dogs, but I just feel
like it's shocking how we as a society have not been able to rally to provide fundamental everyday legal services and access to low-income and poor people.
It creates a culture, though, that lends itself, in legal aid, you have to be so relentlessly resourceful. Everything is stacked against your clients in so many ways. And so again, that is where the resourcefulness and the drive of the students and graduates that come through this institution and the way we're trained and the way we're supported means so much because they do not give up. They do not give up. So it's just, and when I encounter in my travels so many Northeastern graduates, there is something that is very different about the people who come through this institution and the way they practice in a legal aid setting that I find really, really remarkable.
What you're saying, Mytrang, reminds me of the fact that in addition to legal aid and legal services, which we'll come back to in a minute, there are so many important rights movements that are actually helmed and the vision for which has been designed, basically architected by Northeastern alums. It's not only obviously that Northeastern alums are out there making change, they're leading the change. So if we look at leaders in the LGBTQ rights movement, in HIV/AIDS law and some health law leadership issues. We look at reproductive rights issues. At the helm of all these organizations, at the leadership level, what you see is Northeastern lawyers who have worked their way up in the ranks and who are now setting the vision for their organizations and frankly for their movements, similar to what we heard from James and Jim earlier. So on that note, Mytrang, tell me a little bit about when you go out into the field and you visit legal services organizations, legal aid organizations that you've funded or that you're considering funding, how do you see Northeastern's leaders and lawyers out there operating differently than what you gave me some examples when we talked about how the Northeastern lawyers are really sort of owning the field in a way that's different.
Well, it's so interesting. So there's this definition of leadership, and I feel like what I see, it can emanate from anywhere in terms of so you will have a 1L going out on getting ready to kind of finish work or volunteering, the first person in their first co-op. So I do travel quite a bit for my job. I'm part of a performance team that focuses on the quality of legal services and the quality of the grants because it's federal funding, there's a whole audit team that just looks like your more compliance and regulatory aspects of our funding. We're really looking at whether these dollars are doing what we want them to do by low-income people. So we're looking at the quality of the advocacy and the quality of the work going on. And I guess I can give you the example to give you a flavor of my day and also to kind of make the connection also to Northeastern. In the Pro Bono Innovation Fund, we give grants to organizations to leverage private resources in the delivery of legal services. So we're trying to get the Halen Doors to commit hundreds of lawyers to do direct legal services. And so we are putting money into legal aid organizations to hire the practitioners who will be able to do that, to get the technology and to build the systems for this to happen. So I convene the grantees almost every now and again. The grantees, I will put them on a call or we'll do a meeting together where one of the grantees will spotlight and showcase what it is that they're doing that's particularly innovative in leveraging a lot of pro bono resources in the delivery of legal services. So we did it by Zoom recently. There were about 10 grantee organizations who were on the call. And again, for me as the funder, it's, you're the funder, so everyone's acting, you're the funder, so everyone's on their good behavior and they're trying to look good and everyone's doing their thing. So we were, the organization and the grantee that was showcasing their work had just started an expungement pro bono project because of the Black Lives Matter movement, because of what's been going on, there's been a proliferation of expungement laws that have been new and emerging throughout the country. It is a ripe area for pro bono involvement. It's fairly discreet, it's time limited in terms of the commitment, and a lot of people need it, and it can make a very big difference in terms of housing and employment outcomes for the clients who can get their criminal records expunged. So they were showcasing how they were doing it. We pull the records and then we get it to the attorneys and the attorneys can call back and they'll provide the advice and go over the eligibility. And then the person could go into the hearing and they'll represent themselves and go ahead and try to get their record sealed. So everyone was asking questions and learning more about this model. And there was one Northeastern grad on the call who just started saying, well, just not poking holes, but just politely, because again, there was a funder call, was saying, well, what happens if that person goes in, it's a new law, what happens when that person goes in and loses? How are you identifying grounds for appeals? And again, in a nice way, basically asked, what happens to that client? Where it is a new area of practice, if there are grounds for appeals, who is there to take that up and make sure the right way this law should be implemented gets implemented? And they just, poked holes in this, poked so many holes in the model that we were holding up as something to effective that was client-centered. And so for me as a funder, it was just like, okay, number one, I really appreciate those questions, and that is exactly the kind of thing that we as funders need to take the responsibility to look at. Is this client-centered? Are we doing right by these people who are receiving the services that we're funding? Number two, I just thought in my head, the legal aid client that gets that lawyer who's asking those questions just won the lotto in terms of legal aid lotto. Just, that is a client who's going to be safe, their legal needs are going to be taken care of, and it's going to be high quality, hardcore advocacy. And then the third is that, kudos to Northeastern, it was Chet Randall, for anyone who wants to know who was on the call. Right. Who was the deputy director. Class of 96, deputy director of Pine Tree Legal Services. And I'm telling you that because every single day that conversation, those questions are happening by our graduates in the legal aid space, dozens and hundreds of times over. And those are the people I encounter every single day. And so when you ask me about leadership, when you ask me about prominence and stature and accomplishment, to me, that is, in the pandemic, we're talking about essential workers and heroes. These are my everyday, these are essential workers for this legal system. They are absolutely required and the backbone of it because they are making it work better for the most marginalized and disenfranchised BIPOC communities in this country. So they are my everyday heroes. They are my essential workers for this system. And I mean, I'm telling you, we have I want everyone in this room and in this institution to own the space, to own that, have pride of ownership of that what we've done in the legal system.
I love that story. And when Mytrang told me that story, one of the things that I thought of was everywhere that I've gone, everywhere that I've traveled, for work, for community service, for volunteer work, I've seen Northeastern social justice-oriented, brilliant Northeastern minds in leadership roles. And they start, frankly, as co-op students. So again, coming back to that theme of supporting our students on co-op. Last question I want to ask you, Mytrang, is can you give us some examples of pro bono innovation and trends in legal aid pro bono that you think are worth our keeping our eye on as a Northeastern community that cares about what happens in the legal services world and cares about social justice? What's new? What's happening? Where do you see the biggest new innovations that may break through some of the entrenched issues?
Two very quick things I'll say. One is just, we talked about this a little bit, Nima, before this call, before we had this event. I invite you to talk more about this to me at the reception or wherever you may happen to see me, because I feel very strongly about pro bono and pro bono service. I think right now, given the scope of challenges, I'll use evictions as an example, we have to think very broadly in interdisciplinary fashion about how we're solving some of these problems. So we're seeing pro bono involvement beyond just the legal space, and it's a very strategic interdisciplinary approach to solving something like the evictions crisis, which you would think is going to involve only lawyers. It doesn't. Social researchers, social scientists, it needs to be all hands on deck for some of these issues and questions. And so it's very exciting if you're a pro bono volunteer to come into a team like that that's working on the big issue, not in addition to the day-to-day work that is so critical. The second piece I feel very strongly about is to invest in the professionalization of pro bono and legal aid. So legal aid is often so resource constrained that they don't think they can afford to put a 10-year lawyer on the pro bono as the pro bono director. They use more junior level staff to do it. And for me, that really can limit and constrain how you use pro bono in a strategic way. The law firms do it. They now have pro bono partners. They have pro bono teams and staff and counsel. It's very important that in the legal aid world, we also have peers to those law firm partners who can strategize with them and bring those resources to bear to solve some of these issues and to serve low-income people.
That is really good to hear. I actually had not realized how many of the firms, and I've worked closely with law firms, but I didn't know that beyond the Boston area, firms were starting to build out their pro bono teams.
They're doing it. In-house legal departments are also now having their own full-time staff dedicated to pro bono, not just part of the CSR work that they're doing. So we got to catch up and make sure we're leveraging those resources for legal aid.
I think that Miel is telling us that we are talking too much.
It's okay.
I was saying that Mytrang and I
our
talked on the
planning
phone for an hour and a half
our planning
about
call
these
is an
issues
hour and a half.
earlier this week, and there's so much more to say, and there's so much more to share with you. That Mytrang will be there tonight. I'll be there tonight. I'd be so happy to talk to you about what I've seen on the front lines with our Northeastern students going out on co-op, and Mytrang's happy to talk.
And we're going to hit you up for the fund.
And we're going to hit you up again because we've got some goals.
Excellent job. We leave you wanting more for every conversation, and that's the point. Next up is Gina Perini, class of 01 with Dan Danielson. Dan, I'm going to put you on this end. Okay. And Gina, I'm going to put you on the other end. And I'm going to just quickly wipe down these mics. And this has been fantastic. I've enjoyed hearing from everyone.
Thank you.
And Gina's traveling tomorrow internationally, and she feels safer with her mask. So we're just.
I gotta pass all those tests.
If you don't and you need a lawyer.
Good morning, everybody. I mean, there's many, many reasons to love Neil, but I think this conversations thing is just brilliant. It's so exciting to hear what our colleagues and alums and friends are doing. So I'm thrilled to be here with Gina. And it turned out that we had overlapped some years ago. I was a not very long time partner at Foley Hoag, and she was a young summer associate at Foley Hoag. And sort of, as I understand it, you were kind of surprised to find yourself in a firm, given that you came
Completely.
to Northeastern with a really different idea about what you were going to do. So I wanted to talk to you first about changing gears and how you found your way to that co-op.
So, hello, great to see everyone. I came into Northeastern thinking I was going to do public interest law. I was working with nonprofits. I had really thought that I wanted to be a lawyer that advocated for disabled people. I really came in fully thinking I was going to do that. So this is an interesting twist on the co-op story, because I came in and then I really opened myself up. The co-op program is just so fantastic. I mean, and everything that folks have said about the culture and the community here, it is just a place that you thrive and grow. And I really, truly benefited from that for myself. And so I came in, and in the process, I didn't really know, so I opened myself up to the opportunity of trying different things. And one of those opportunities was summer associate at Foley Hoag. I really just thought, why not? There might have been a smidge like, I want to see where I could go as a summer associate, right? You know, people get a little competitive around that. That's like the only spot I saw a little bit of competition in Northeastern. So I did it. And then I came in and I just had this eureka that I actually really liked this thing called business law. I was horrified. I didn't know. I was like, this can't be true. I just fell in love with it. And I had amazing mentors, and I loved something about it, just clicked for me, and it was so surprising. So it really led me on a completely different trajectory in my life. But so many of the values and things that I cared about were never left behind. And I think that's really what was so interesting. And you know, I'm the CEO of a tech company now, so you just never know where those things, and co-op was the thing that shockingly kind of led me on this very, very fulfilling life. And so that was the funny part.
Yeah. No, I mean, I did the same thing. I started working at a corporate firm thinking I would be there for a year or two, and 13 years later, I was still there. So it happens. So tell me about your path. I mean, you went from a firm lawyer to being a CEO of a company.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen? Where were
Yeah.
the surprising twists and turns along the way?
So I love so many of the pieces of stories we've heard this morning, and I really resonated with. It was a lot of circuitous, really, luck and timing, but then a lot of it was just figuring out where I could be helpful, where I could change a narrative, bring a different voice to the table. Even in those, environments, I think sometimes we look at business law, and I particularly was working with innovators and creators, and bringing a different perspective. I think that really helped me because I didn't have the same voice of a lot of the other lawyers in the conference room or in the boardroom, and I used that as my superpower. Didn't always work as a superpower for those that were in that room, but it was a way for me to kind of change the way I looked at it. So I took bigger opportunities. I took bigger risks. Again, many of them did not work out, but they kept on sort of leading me along. And one of the biggest risks I took was I had moved in-house as general counsel for one of my clients. I was ready to kind of really be in the trenches. I asked them, I said, well, why don't you also make me chief administrative officer? There was no reason they should have done that, but they did, and I probably shouldn't have asked it. But I ended up running regulatory, HR, even operations. I mean, I was completely out of my depth. I got a lot of good people to help me, including a lot of Northeastern folks, to help me get through it. But one of the things I learned was how important it was, I think, to really bring, not be afraid of those next, areas of where you could go, particularly because I think it was discussed Judge Cabell had that wonderful sort of like, he would be the only person of color in a room. He was so used to it that it wasn't like, you know, something different. I was always the only woman in the room. In many of these scenarios, I was so used to it, but I recognize I can't let this happen anymore. I've got to bring in others into these conversations, other women, people of color, people from different backgrounds to this, and I felt a real push for that. So the big piece for me was I need to take the next step. I need to make bigger decisions, and I need to be the one to make those decisions. So when the CEO that I worked for, there was, you know, separated, I was like, I want the job. And again, no reason to do that. I mean, but it was a really profound moment to really step up. I got the job, and then I had to really make a change. We now have only, you know, of my entire board of 8 people, and I'm the chair of the board now, as well as my executive team of 8 people. All of them, except for one, are women and people of color. But it was a real move in the right direction. And my company itself, which is a global company now, has primarily, I think over, I don't know the exact numbers, I was thinking about this morning, over 50% women and over 40% people of color. And we have, you know, whole pipelines with historically black colleges that we're working on now with bringing more engineers into our program because we're a tech company. So all of these things really, I think, are important for my trajectory, and Northeastern critical for how to really learn how to do that.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, it's, you know, coming back to where you started, through this amazing opportunity that you have to lead a seriously important tech company. How do you think that your legal training helps you in your day-to-day with respect to being a CEO?
Yeah, well, I love to quip that the JD is the new MBA. And I know I stole that from someone, I just don't know who said it. But I think that you know, having the ability to assess a lot of data quickly, see what's not there, bring critical thinking, and apply risk analysis, and to do it so fast. I mean, that to me as a CEO has been unbelievably helpful to me, I mean, through my whole trajectory. And I actually look for those people who can do that for my executive team, for key managers, folks, because in the world that we're in today, where we have so much AI, so much technology helping us, that human critical thinking factor, especially when you think about risk, is so important. I feel like I learned that through being a lawyer, and I work with a lot of people who have MBAs, clearly, but they don't have quite that same perspective and their ability to move very quickly, because we don't have time to, you know, do anything but adapt, pivot, and continuously improve. And I think that's why the training to me is key.
Fantastic. Well, I'm constantly telling my corporation students that that's the case, but it's thrilling to hear. It's true. So I just as a last thought, I was just thinking, so you've climbed so many mountains along this way, and you're now at the pinnacle in one sense.
I hope not.
No, but that was what I was going to say. Is sort of, you know, if you look out into the future, what sorts of possibilities are you imagining might be out there for the next mountain?
So I actually will tie this back to Northeastern a bit. One of the things I learned here that was really profound for me was sometimes, you know, and I've heard these amazing stories of all the amazing inspirational things people are doing. And I think one of the things I learned at Northeastern was it's the little things too. It's those things that you can do in your world and your ecosystem and the things you can control that you can make an impact. And so when I think about what I want to do, I've been so focused on this business and this company and really having it be a model that diversity, inclusion, and equity will be your strategic, strong, you know, your superpower for your business, and that I want to prove it. I want the data. I want to show that people just don't talk about it. We did it here, and it's a proof case at my company, I need to bring that outside. Now I need to bring that more externally. I need to talk to other folks. I need to bring other leaders into this conversation, and that's really what I want to focus on, and really expand that and bring more into this conversation. I think it's happening in a lot of places, but I don't see it enough, and I see a lot of, especially like COVID, with so many different challenges, people entrench, they get very into the comfort zone, they get into what they know. That's actually the time when you should lean into the new and lean into trying to do it differently. And so having more conversations like that and pushing myself to make sure that I'm challenging myself to talk to as many people and get the word, talk to more leaders about what they can do at all ranges of their professional careers, that you can make an impact in many ways, even that you might feel like they're small. You might not be the CEO, but you can absolutely make an impact to bring these kind of values into business.
Eastern all the way to the core.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Gina.
You're welcome.
Thank you both. Big fan of Gina's. We've been together with the Women in the Law Advisory Group for almost 15 years now, so she really puts her money where her mouth is, so thank you, Gina. Next up, we have former Dean Jeremy Paul, and we have Jay Pozenel from the UN. She's going to quickly, I would love
Thank you.
We'll just be really quick with our Clorox wipes. Make you as safe as you can be, and now you'll smell lemony fresh.
I don't think there's any hope for that.
So Jay, thank you for being here, and thank you all for being here. It's great for me to have a chance to see so many of you again. Judge Cabell, I followed your advice. This was the place I wanted to be. I just kept applying until finally they said yes. I'm delighted that that worked out. I share your view that you shouldn't really tell anybody where they should go to law school, but if you want to stress things about Northeastern, think of the mentors that you had, that you mentioned, Harry Daniels, Bill Worth. I know all of you are going to do that kind of thing for our current students and future students, and it really makes a difference. I think that, yes, it's true our profession is too pedigree-oriented, but different groups have different pedigrees. We had 3 Scaddons last year. Not many schools do that, so I think it's a great thing. And as far as reticence about whether to participate in this or not, Miel asked, so that was yes, had to be yes. And I want to thank Miel for putting this together, and thank you all for being here. And Jay, I particularly want to thank you. He came up here from New York. He's traveling overseas tomorrow, is that right? And so we really appreciate you being here. And I was really glad to be paired with you because I'm really tired of whether Christian cinema is going to support taxes and your international perspective, I think, is priceless. So you have an interesting background. You studied literature. You studied in New Mexico. I'll let you tell people about your journey, which was good. And then I know we'd all love to hear about what issues on the international scene facing the UN that we're not thinking about all the time that we should be. So thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Dean Paul. I came to Northeastern. It wasn't the only school I applied to, but it was the one I wanted to go to. I had friends who graduated in the class of '87, and I knew about this place as a very special place, and it was. In college, I grew up in New Mexico. I went off to college in upstate New York. And there I started to become exposed to political economy. I'd always thought I'd be an engineer or something. For whatever reasons, I started studying literature because I like to read books and the newspaper. So I said, I'll be a political science and literature major. And it was an easy way to get through college, just reading and reading about current events. But I really started to, delve into questions of political economy and social justice on a global scale. And I started to think, how can I do that as a profession, as an avocation? And Don was telling me earlier that when I came to Northeastern years later, he asked me, well, what do you want to do someday? And I said, well, I want to work at the UN. And I don't remember saying that, but obviously that was a goal. And I worked to get a co-op in my third year. And I went to the UN as a co-op student. They put me right to work. I was working for a Ugandan director there who put me right to work doing legal work for that office and sort of the in-house general counsel's office, which I am now the director of. I followed two women who were the directors, and we have a tremendous crew of lawyers from all over the world who, and most of my senior lawyers in charge of my litigation practice areas, I think 5 of the 6 of them are women from all over the world. And it's just a great place to work. As a co-op student, I was thrown right in, but they said, look, you can't work here until you have lots of experience, so don't bother to apply. My other passion that I arrived at while working here was to work as a labor lawyer. And I started out in practice as a union side labor lawyer here in Boston, inspired, of course, by Carl Clare, who taught me civil rights law in his labor course, Labor 2. And that was wonderful. I had great clients. My best clients were a bunch of school janitors. They knew their collective bargaining agreement better than any client I'd known, because being involved in union affairs was the one way they could participate and deal in a political environment with dignity. And I felt it my duty to really do my best to represent them. It wasn't hard because they knew the contract better than I did. So it was wonderful practice, but one day in the law firm, I got a call, and of course it was a small firm, and the receptionist said, hey, Jay, it's the UN calling. And this was in the early 90s, and they said, we need lawyers to backfill because now that the wall has fallen and Russia's breaking up, there's no more sclerosis in this Security Council. We're having peacekeeping missions starting up everywhere. Our lawyers are going out. We need somebody to backfill. So can you come for 6 months? I said, I just started in this law firm, 6 months. Okay, we'll make it a year. So I did. I went down. 1 year led to 2 to 3, and 30 years later, I'm still there. It's been a wonderful journey.
So tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
So my office is the central legal office for the UN for its principal organs. We deal with Security Council issues, General Assembly issues, but we also support the funds and programs, UNICEF, UNDP, the High Commission for Refugees, World Food Program, the Population Fund, and we also liaise with the other UN system organizations that are separately constituted. You've heard of some of them, the World Health Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization up in Montreal, etc. My office has 6 divisions, 4 of which are more substantive. So we have a division for ocean affairs and law of the sea. I always joke that nobody but they know what they're doing there. We have a division in Vienna that deals with international trade law, sort of like the UCC for international transactions. We have a division that deals with treaties and the registration and giving advice on treaties. And finally, we have a division whose main objective is the codification of international law, the codification division. They call themselves the COD division for short, and I always wondered about what fish they've got drying in their archives. My division, the general legal division, is sort of the in-house operational side. We deal with peacekeeping, humanitarian affairs, the general work of the organization all over the world. And the other transactional office is called the Office of the Legal Counsel that deals with more of the pure public international law questions, questions of the status and privileges and immunities. We also deal with that in just everything we do, and how to represent a client in its worldwide operations. I think the biggest challenges we face, and I think that's where you want me to go, it mirrors what we're seeing in the United States, which is isolationism, division. There's no turning back to the interconnectedness of this world. The fact that, what we do in Boston and how we use our environment and how we use energy, how we use food affects not only people in this area, but all over the world. And we are interconnected. And the decisions we make have profound implications. Next week, there's a gathering of people from all over the world in Glasgow to start to talk about, how can we really make commitments that will stick to ensuring that we have a future on this planet. And so this is enormously important, the interconnectedness of our world, the globalization of our world. It's not going to end. And all of this isolationism, is really quite sad, but I see it every day that there is multilateralism at work, and it's very important. And there's a lot of people in desperate conditions around this world. Migrants, refugees, just people trying to live ordinary lives on meager subsistence. And we're out there trying to inoculate them. We're out there trying to help them. We're trying to keep the peace because war is the biggest, problem many of these folks are facing because they're side victims of the inability to resolve political matters other than through violence. And so the work we do, and my job is to support the people that are out there in the field doing this important work. And it's enormously important that we recognize that. Somebody said earlier, we have to take care of ourselves. And it's really been profound in this pandemic to have to work with my colleagues from my home dining room table. My wife, is laughing at me, yelling at my computer all day long. But I've had to go out every day. Neil was talking about bicycling. I go out every day at noon for an hour ride just to clear my head and also to clear my lungs. And it's important, and I'm trying to keep my staff and all the staff and people we interact with mindful to take care of yourself because we do have a lot of stress. There's a lot to do.
So we didn't have a chance to talk about this before, but if there are some books you think people should read or world figures that we should be following that we're not, maybe you can say something about that. But I know we're going to run out of time soon, so I really want to give you a chance to talk about, was there some professor or some experience that you had in law school that would be interesting to the group to hear about, or something you want to add about that?
I'm sure we all have fond memories, but I was in a small section first year, we all were. My professor was Denise Cardi-Bonilla for civil procedure. And I remember, showing up to law school with visions of social justice. I walked into her classroom, sat down, and in comes this impeccably dressed, perfectly speaking woman talking about Pennoyer versus Neff and quasi-in rem jurisdiction, personal understanding personal jurisdiction. So for about a week, I was saying, well, where is this leading? This woman is really talking about quasi-in rem jurisdiction. And about a week or two later, Denise came in. She wasn't as impeccably dressed. She was a little more business casual. And her manner of speech and the use of language became a little more relaxed as well. And we started talking about Fuentes versus Shevin and the right of replevin and how the law is used and can be used to suppress and oppress. And then, she started talking about those mother and, and I said, okay, now the real person's coming out. And it was a wonderful experience. I remember her saying, Thurgood Marshall needs to listen to Justice Brennan and telling us why. And she really inspired me. I used to drive into school because I lived in southern New Hampshire and I'd listen to NPR every morning. And one morning I heard about a case going up to the Supreme Court, Webster versus Reproductive Health Services. She hadn't heard about this case. So I brought it to her attention and she got on the stick, got on the phone and organized an amicus brief for that case. She gave me a copy. I helped her with that. And, you know, this was about social justice in action. And I watched her just make some phone calls, and all of a sudden people were mobilized. And that was the power of Denise. And my biggest regret to this day is that other students did not have, you know, the company of that spirit, that great and noble spirit. And so for all of you who never knew Denise and who never, you know, walked in her presence, she was why I came to Northeastern.
Excellent. So signs of hope from your international experience, things that you look at, and you said something about how there are sprouts that we might not be able to see. Maybe you could just tell us something about that.
I think just one sign is people going to Glasgow next week. It's not perfect. This is not a perfect world, and the UN and the international bodies are not perfect. They're a reflection of an imperfect world. But we're trying. We're out there doing this. We're recognizing this. And it's not just internationally. I mean, you know, what you're doing at the Y, everything we do is interconnected. And it's important that you know, we use the law to try to help those who are oppressed by the law, by other things, by circumstance. So, you know, all of you, I'm proud to be here today.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Jeremy. I'm continually impressed by all of our grads doing all different types of work around the world, internationally, in all different settings. Next up, we have Rishi Reddy, who's interviewing Reed Zars. Come on down. They're doing great work. Rishi is an author. She's written a very well-received book. So I hope you all check that out. And Reed is an environmental lawyer who's helping us save our planet. His side is Reed, just because his water bottle's here. Do you want to switch? Okay. Are you testing me?
No.
Okay. Just worried about that.
You know, we have all our neuroses. So.
Got it. Welcome.
Hello.
Greetings.
Is this working yet? Is this working yet? Okay, great. I want to just say how great it is to be back here at this place and to welcome you all, and also to thank Neil for putting me in this slot to interview Reed, because I have also had an environmental career. So the opportunity to talk to you and meet you had great meaning for me. So I just want to say that right up front. So anybody who cares about the environment knows how much litigation has played in terms of moving our agenda forward, in terms of protecting the planet. And anybody who knows about environmental litigation knows the name of Reed Zars. And Reed told me not to go through a bio for him today, but I've decided to ignore that. I do have to quickly run through a list of things that Reed has accomplished in his life. So over the past 25 years, Reed has successfully litigated cases against our biggest fossil fuel entities of our era. So Texaco, Conoco, Southern California Edison, Tennessee Valley Authority, Los Angeles Department of Power and Water. These are just a few of those. And his work has led to an estimated reduction in air pollutants from the equivalent of 20 million vehicles. And along the way, he's represented such important entities as the Sierra Club, Grand Canyon Trust, National Parks Conservation Association, and he's received awards from EPA, the Trial Lawyers for Public Justice, the National Law Journal Pro Bono Attorney, and Sierra Club. So please forgive me, Reed, I had to go through that. So you started your schooling here, your formal schooling in college and law school right here in Massachusetts and of course NUSL. But could you tell, and right now you live in Wyoming, could you tell us a little bit about how you got there from here?
First, I should note that I proposed to Rishi, after speaking with her, that I do the interview and that she be the one to be interviewed.
Okay.
I'm humbled in her presence, and we really should reverse roles, but as you can see, she's very non-compliant. So the question was, how did I end up in Wyoming? I take it.
Yes.
Okay, so what you're looking at is a person who grew up on a ranch in rural Colorado, and I have a sort of dual citizenship between rural America and urban. And every time I come to urban America, I criticize it and say that it should be really more understanding of rural America. And every time I go to rural America, I criticize it because it doesn't understand our urban fellows and neighbors. Same thing happens to me when I go overseas and somebody criticizes America that I've been criticizing for many years, and I stand up for it. What do you mean? America's the greatest, country in the world. Well, anyway, so how did I get here? Well, I did go to school here in Massachusetts in
Williams.
At Williams, yeah. These insignificant schools. And then decided after that I'd never go to school again. I'd had enough, and that my job was to correct the ills of the world. Well, I did that for a number of years in Wyoming, with public interest groups, and then I kept having lawyers tell me that I needed to go to law school. I think because they hoped I'd come back and sue their clients and they could make some money. But I then came to Northeastern because I didn't want to go to law school. And I saw Northeastern as a school that really wasn't a law school. I looked very much into going to the co-ops. As it turned out, I really liked law school. It was the strangest thing. I just found like, wow, this is cool. I've never even heard of like John Marshall. I mean, who are these people? It was just splendid reading, and I just learned tons. So after Northeastern, though, I worked with Lee Breckenridge here at the Environmental Protection Division in the AG's office, which both Northeastern and the Attorney General's office under Lee's amazing tutelage was sort of my nursery. And I learned from that to then not go up in a corporate ladder, but go down, work on my own back in rural America. That didn't answer any of your questions, but I'd be interested.
Well, I credit Lee for my directing me into environmental work as well. I mean, she influenced so many students, and yeah, I was very sad to hear that she retired recently, but I know she's still around, to give advice here and there. So Reed, on your way to sort of national litigator status, what is the first case that you would credit in terms of turning your path in that direction to be a litigator in the type of cases that you take? Was there one particular case that influenced you or that landed on your desk that set you down that path?
Well, sure. A little bit of background. I had a number of years, like 4 or 5, with Lee in the Attorney General's office, and I had some experience there, and perhaps an exalted sense of self-confidence. I left there and went back to Colorado and Wyoming. And I landed a case against the Public Service Company of Colorado, which was the state's largest utility company in one of its power plants. And I I was just surprised how much pollution was coming from it, and I was surprised by one of the defenses they were using. Okay, so I'm going to get into a couple of quick technical terms, and we'll just get this over with. There's a term called opacity, and it's the darkness of the plume of the pollution that comes out of power plants. And they were under a limitation. It was about 20% opacity. And I'd look at that thing and say, well, I don't know what 20% opacity is, but it looks pretty dark to me. And I viewed their continuous opacity monitor data. And it showed that they were running at 50, 80, 100% opacity, which was reasonably dark. So I brought a suit against them for exceeding their limit. The defense was that I could not, and citizens could not use that information because the only way to enforce the law was through Method 9, or the so-called calibrated eyeball. All right, so I needed to know what calibrated eyeball meant, and there's a school that you can go to learn about how to perform Method 9. It goes something like this. I asked for background reading, there is none. What should I bring? A lawn chair. All right. And you sit outside and they burn leaves in a burner. And then they tell you what the opacity is that's coming out of the little smokestack. And you eyeball it and they say, okay, that's 30. Okay, yeah, got it. Then they burn a little more and throw some water on it. Okay, that's 40. Okay, yeah, I think I've got that. That was maybe a 10 or 15 minute period of instruction, and then you turn to the testing phase, where it has to happen pretty quickly because you begin to lose your calibration. So I passed the test, you know, with some help from some other people that were showing me what the answers were. We all shared. This was a communal exercise. And then we were certified Method 9 readers from that point on. Anyway, I understood what that was. The matter went to the judge on this as to whether that was the exclusive method. You know, this is like science with this calibrated eyeball. The judge said, no, the Sierra Club and Mr. Zars can use these 20,000 violations that were shown by the continuous opacity monitor that never blinked and were perfectly calibrated. That was a key decision that then had ramifications across the country. They had been using this defense forever, and as a result, it resulted in litigation in many states that required cleanup of billions of dollars worth of equipment. But it was one single sort of cultural impediment across EPA and all the states that we were able to overcome with one case.
It was
very cool.
fabulous, yeah. So Reed, one of the questions that I asked you when we were talking on the phone was how, you know, you, in the model that you're working out there in Wyoming, that you're taking these cases with no promise of payment. And that strikes me as a very courageous way to practice. And I asked you to tell me a little bit about that and how you would make that decision, given like most of us go to law school to figure out how we're going to get paid. You know? Could you comment about that a little bit?
Okay, so there used to be honor in being an Olympian. And one of the things I remember from years ago anyway, was that one should not harm one's background by being paid money. And so I felt like, well, the way to stay pure in this business is to not take money and harm my amateur status. So I've felt it a point of pride to specialize in cases that I'm not paid for. Okay, so that's the talking point. Now, what's really going on here is that under these cases, I can get money if I prevail. And it's charged to the other side. And these are fee-shifting provisions like in civil rights or environmental law. But there's significant risks involved, but I enjoy that, actually, and that's part of the challenge of the operation, and it makes victory that much greater and loss that much, well, many of my cases are 1,000 hours or more. In this last Diesel Brothers case, it was over 2,000 hours, and you're hanging out there a fair amount, but I like it, and I kind of thrive on the risk in some ways.
And how have your wife and children?
Yes, well, these are difficult subjects. The issue came up actually with my in-laws, who were perhaps as startled as some of you when they learned exactly how I was operating. They looked at it like, wait, they speak to my wife, Megan, did you understand this, about Reed? Who's caring for you? And there was some question, actually, apparently, about my mental stability. But we've gotten over that. We've all learned to live. The kids got over me cutting their health care. I said, you guys look pretty healthy at the time. So we've all been able to live. But here's what's basically happened. I've been, as we've talked before, you learn through both your victories and your defeats. But I have secured some judgments that have been in my favor, and I now say I take cases rather than cruises, but I just put the money away and then use it for my next case, and that's the war chest, and that's what makes me continue to go. And I've really not had much of any funding from any outside.
Reed, what would your children say about growing up in your household if they had a tale to tell?
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. We've created sort of this bond. I hope your families are like mine, and many of like my cases. You create your own sort of ecosystem within a structure of people. And my kids are that way. They acquired a movement that feels like it was our family instead of just me.
Yeah.
And I would take them on many of my cases, to be honest, because they were the antidote to me dealing with a lot of lawyers that I really didn't appreciate. And I'd take them to Texas with our arguments against Alcoa, or to Tennessee and the TVA cases, or to California or Nevada for my other cases. And they would be there with me in the hearings, and I'd say, and now we're going to Carlsbad Caverns, or do something else. And so right now, I would have to say, without getting too emotional about it, is that they're the best friends I have in this world.
Did any of them become lawyers?
Now, that was a downside. They'd be perfect. They'd be perfect, but they somehow acquired this rebel kind of status or mindset. And so they didn't.
They didn't.
None of them did.
Well, when you're not trying these high-profile national environmental cases, what are you doing with your time?
Okay, so I share an interest here among many of cycling. And while I was here at Northeastern, and then at the AG's office, I would race the hill climb in Washington on mountain bike, which is just this terrific, it's very challenging ride. And I like that. I like my cases in 1 minute. And I did this in a little bit over an hour. But so I bike and I ski, and all our kids are very competitive in races and things like that. So you break it up with many other things. You have to treat yourself well in this operation, or you're just no good to anyone.
And I understand you're a very committed Nordic skier, that you've been in some national competitions as well
Yes,
for that.
That's good.
And you're being too modest about that, but so we won't. So in my spare time, I am a writer, and I had to ask you, what is your favorite book?
Okay, well, I've told you several things, but I didn't tell you the one that I was going to tell you now. Okay, so Winston Churchill's 5-volume set on the history of the Second World War is priceless to me. There's so many lessons there for lawyers and litigators and people of this world. But the classic quote, of course, is that you want to be a member of the few in this one, where he said, never before in the field of human conflict have so many done so much for so few. And I thought, ooh, this was in the Battle of Britain. I want to be one of the few. But it's just a story of courage that's unparalleled, beautifully done. There are many others, Heart of Darkness, King Lear, Tom Sawyer, but that's one that really holds out.
All right. Reed, in your long career, tell us about one particular case that was very compelling or that, says something to you and that you keep remembering even now.
Okay, so I can do the Mojave case, but will we be able to?
Can we do it?
Run the video?
Oh,
okay.
Wonderful. Yeah, so give us a little setup for this.
This case fit all my parameters, no pay, seemingly impossible, and against some of the country's world's largest firms. And that was a plant operated by Southern California Edison in Nevada. Totally out of control, no SO2 controls or particulate matter to speak of. And I brought the case on behalf of the Grand Canyon Trust, and we prevailed in that and had it loaded up with all sorts of requirements to put on scrubbers and bag houses, NOx controls. And it was so much money that they'd been externalizing by not using before, so that it was a pretty profitable plant, that they decided to close it down. Then I got a call, that was under a consent decree. Then I received a call several years later that said, Reed, would you like to participate in its implosion? This sounds great. But only one condition, that my youngest son, who's still at home, could come to. And so what you're going to hear, first, this is now the implosion of the Mojave plant. And I had proposed to my son Tilden that pretty sure that the people that were behind this power plant were relatively incompetent. And so the implosion probably wouldn't work itself. And so be prepared to watch this thing, and the stack will just stay there. It's not going to fall over. You'll see the result.
Any minute. 1 minute, 1 minute. There it is. Oh, there it goes. There it goes.
Oh! It didn't go.
Oh,
Oh, it's gone.
no, there it goes.
It's gone.
It's going.
Oh!
Oh, yeah.
Oh!
Oh, man, did you feel that?
That is a great symbol for your work. And I'll ask you one last question, Reed. Our biggest environmental challenge right now is, of course, climate change. What do you tell people who feel a great sense of anxiety, despair, helplessness, powerlessness? Not that I feel those things every day in my day job. What do you tell them about the work that you do and that we can do?
Well, this is a difficult one. We all know that there are massive challenges out there. But I just tell them we can't be paralyzed by the immensity of the problems that beset us. And each of us has to work on what you can and really try to keep your focus on your own abilities And if you spend so much time worrying about the colossal problems that are out there and trying to resolve them, we're not going to get anywhere. But we have to work incrementally. And that's what I've done. And I've tried to focus on what I can do and what will make a difference. And hopefully that will carry through to other people doing similarly. So that's the short
Thank you, Reed.
Fantastic job, Reed and Eshghi. Thank you both so much. Thank you to all our pairings this morning. You all did a terrific job. I hope you all enjoyed it. It's a taste of what Northeastern is all about, but that's no surprise to all of you. Come grab maybe one more cup of coffee. If you're signed up to come to the tent tonight, that's at 5:30. You enter under the colorful art installation and you'll see a pathway. Thank you, everybody, for coming this morning.